Hey there, welcome to Kitty Witty Papercraft. I'm Amy if you're new here. In this video I am sharing something that I just made this week, and as you can see it is basically what is commonly referred to as a tag flip. But this one isn't really made up of tags, it's made up of a variety of small items that are about the size of tags, but they're a mix of all sorts of things that you usually find in a junk journal. So I'm calling this a junk journal on a ring, because it's basically a deconstructed junk journal really. So there's no cover, but it has many of the same kinds of things inside of it. So there is scrapbook paper in here, just kind of in here almost like as a little page I can add things to. There's ephemera, there's little charms, there's little pockets and tuck spots. So similar things that you would see inside of a journal, but they are just hole punched and added to a ring. And this is a great little project to make if you've never made a junk journal before, because it can be a first kind of dip your toe in the water with it. Just playing around with the elements that you use in a journal without having the commitment of building a cover and sewing in pages and all of that. So like one of the things you can do is when you have all of your pieces, the way you put them on the ring, you can play around with how to create a nice flow from start to finish. So the pieces kind of all coordinate, because you're going to have like different size pieces in here. So you can make it so like the smaller pieces go with the bigger pieces beneath it, like it as far as like colors and that sort of thing. So that's a nice way to kind of play with the creative aspect of junk journaling. And then you can also practice making little pockets and tuck spots and that sort of thing. And it's just done on this like smaller, kind of simpler scale. And it's kind of similar to making a ring-bound journal, but again, it's just smaller. And the other reason why I like to make these is they make a great handmade gift. So if you like to give something handmade when you give gifts, but you're not quite ready to make a junk journal, this could be a good option. And you can make these in any theme for lots of different holidays or occasions. This one here, obviously, you've probably already been able to tell, is a vintage recipe or cooking theme. And this would make a really cute housewarming gift or a wedding shower gift. And just the recipe cards that I have on here, they just lend themselves really well to this kind of style because they're already pretty small. Now this one is a pretty big tag flip, if you want to call it a tag flip. This is pretty big. I made one at Easter time, and you can see side by side, this one is a good bit smaller, so there's not as many little flippy things on it, and they're not as wide, but you can go as small or as big as you like with these. And this one, because I really wanted to feature recipe cards, it's a little bit wider, so it's pretty big, but I think it makes a really nice gift. And I'm putting I put the elements on a 1 3/4 inch binder ring. So these are really old. This pack I got at Michael's probably 2 years ago or something. So I don't know if they still have it, but I know they carry rings in their store. So you just have to check. And this is just a nice size, not too small, not too big. So I like that size for these projects. And let's see, what did I want to share? So I love anything that is retro cooking or kitchen related, and I've wanted to make a recipe junk journal for the longest time, but I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. So like one of the things I want to do is take these Betty Crocker cookbook binders, so it's a binder style cookbook, and make this into a recipe journal. So I have a binder actually in my kitchen where I have, let me zoom out a little bit, geez, I'm kind of close there. I have tons of recipes that I've printed off the internet or pulled out of magazines, and it's really chunky, and it's just kind of a plain binder I got in an office supply store or something. So I would love to somehow incorporate all of those recipes into a junk journal and put them in one of these binder cookbooks. So that is a plan for someday. And I also would like to make a recipe journal from this particular little golden book. So this is one of my favorite little golden books, and I think it would make a great recipe journal, or even like a cookbook themed junk journal, or like, writing, keeping like memories from, recipes that have been handed down in your family, or just cooking stories, that kind of thing. So this would make a really fun journal for that. And it is illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, Corinne Malvern. And the pictures in it are so sweet. And there's actually little recipes in here. And it's just a really sweet little book. And this one is pretty hard to find. And this is the only copy I have. And when you do find them, they're kind of expensive. So I've kind of been saving this to make a special journal from eventually. But I saw that KB and Friends had some adorable retro kitchen printables in her shop, and I just had to make something with them. So I made this junk journal on a ring, since I don't have time to make an actual junk journal right now. And I think I'll just kind of flip through it. So this is a finished project here, and I am going to just flip through and share that with you. And then at the end, I'm going to share real quickly just the kind of elements that went into making this. So you can kind of see over here on the side, I've got some things. And this is some stuff I have pulled together to make another one of these rings, and it's going to be in a baking theme. So I will share that with you at the end, but let me just flip through this really quickly with you. So like I said, it's pretty chunky. I could probably have gotten away with putting less on here, but this was a lot of fun to make, and I had a lot of things to add to it. So I am using, I guess as my base, you could say, the printable sets from KB and Friends that are called Printable Retro Food Box Tops. So all these little like images that look like they were box tops. And then there's another set called Retro Kitchen Printable Ephemera. And there's all sorts of little different, some are box tops, some are just little word things, little journaling cards, little flashcards, and all of that. So those two sets kind of are the base for this, and that's where I got the color scheme for this, because there's lots of reds and yellows and blues in this, and they're just really beautiful. So I knew I wanted to work with them. And besides the printables, I just have some blank recipe cards, like different style vintage recipe cards that are blank. And the idea, especially if you're doing this for a gift, is you can write your own recipes on the blank cards, or you can use them to journal. So if you're doing this project for yourself, this could be where you write down some of your favorite cooking memories, or funny, cooking stories, disaster, recipe disasters, and that kind of thing. So having some places where you can write either recipes or just some journaling on are fun, and the blank recipe cards are great for that. And there's also some journaling cards from the printable sets that you can also write on. And you can write on the front, you can write on the backs, like ones like this that are like heavily detailed on the front. I will just write on the backs of them. So I just keep them plain, print them on white paper, and just write on the back. So besides that, there are just some vintage ephemera that kind of fits the theme, and some actual vintage recipe cards. So you can find packs of these, like a bundle or a lot, on eBay or Etsy, or in antique shops. You'll sometimes see them. And I love these handwritten recipe cards, or sometimes they're typed. And I have them in there, not necessarily for the recipes themselves, although, that could be something that you do, but just the nostalgia of it. I love adding that to this kind of project. And there's some vintage, I'll show you as I flip through. So there's kind of a mix of vintage and new in here. So it's going to be old recipes and new recipes, and then just kind of cooking and recipe themed things. So starting at the front, I like to put some little charms at the front. So I've got these are actually vintage fridge magnets in these little vegetable shapes with the googly eyes. And I thought they were so perfectly kitschy. And I just I used E6000 glue to glue these eye pins on the back so I could put a jump ring on it. And then I just covered it with washi because I was getting impatient for it to dry when I was taking photos the other day. So I added that and I just left it there. But I've got that little charm in the front, and then I've got this little milk cap die cut from Pretty Little Studio that I turned into a little charm. I don't know if you can see. I've got this, I hole punched it with a small like 1/8 inch circle hole punch, and I just put a jump ring through that. And I love these little milk cap die cuts, and I'm getting them back in stock. They'll be back in my shop next week. And I've actually got a couple new sets. She has a couple more of the vintage milk caps in different new sets. So I'll have 4 different packs of these, and they are so fun to craft with. And I just used some dimensional foam and layered it with some jute string and some scrapbook paper punches behind it. And then, like I said, I hole punched it and made it a little charm. And then I added some vintage Tupperware measuring spoons as charms too. I just took them apart and slipped them right on the ring, so they're little charms. And if you do something like this as a gift, you could put a brand new set of measuring spoons on there, like for a wedding gift or something. So it's kind of practical and decorative at the same time. So I'll just do a little flip through. I also have a video on my IGTV on my Instagram account showing how I decorated the printables from KB and Friends, those 2 sets I just mentioned, and just kind of how I embellished them. And I did that ahead of time, and then I added them to the ring. So you can find out more details on that video there. But so this is just one of the food box tops I added. I guess I should probably talk about it here so you don't have to watch 2 different videos if you didn't already see that one. Just added some little fabrics to that, just with some staples. This one is a toy baking set box top. This is actually from the printable ephemera set. And I just used that foam adhesive, the dimensional foam adhesive, to close in the top and the bottom and the side, and left this side open for a pocket. And then there's just some vintage tickets and a vintage recipe that was cut out of a cardboard box. And then I just added some little fabric tabs to the top so you can easily pull them out of the box there. And then this little recipe card. Sometimes recipe cards are like 3x5 or 4x6 and they're flat, but there are some that have this little fold out area, which I love because you can do a lot more writing on those. And I also have some images that I printed off of Pinterest that kind of go with this theme. So you'll see I've got several little aprons. They're just fun little flip things. I've got some of my favorite vintage cookbook covers I found on Pinterest and just printed those out in different sizes and cut those out just for a little decorative element. And this little journaling card. This is a flash card that I just mounted to the scrapbook paper. The scrapbook paper I used in this set is from Authentique, and it's an older collection called Saucy. I don't know if they still make that one, but I really love the paper in that set. And this just has a vintage newspaper clipping recipe tucked in that little spot there, and I just leave part of it hanging out. In this one, I took one of the printable box tops and I just made a tip-in. So this is another little thing that you often see in junk journals, is like a little tip-in where you attach something to the edge of a page with washi tape. So there's washi on the front and on the back, so you can just flip this piece out that you've attached, and then there's extra journaling space there. And then I just added some more washi on the center line there just for a little extra sturdiness, and it's attached to a vintage recipe card. And I like how you can still see the cute illustrations on the vintage card there. And then a seed packet for lettuce. So I have just different kind of like food sort of themed ephemera in here, and I just left the pocket open, and then you can easily slip in a journaling card. It's another box top from KB and Friends. Here's one of those recipe cards, and I just attached a vintage milk cap to that. And I just love these images. They're so realistic to the time. I think KB and Friends, Catherine, the designer, she's so good at capturing the true, like, authentic feel of the retro graphics and illustrations you would see, like mid-century. Just so good. Love it. Here is a index card from like a recipe file box. So I've got a few of those in here, and they're just fun because of the graphics here and the text, and then it's blank, so you have lots of space to write on. And then this one here, that's just another little decorative item, and it's a printable flashcard that I made like a little blue ribbon on. So this is one of the Pretty Little Studio die cut milk caps, and then I just made a crepe paper rosette behind it, and then some vintage feed sack fabric as a little streamers on that, so it looks kind of like a little blue ribbon. A doily. This is another little printable from the ephemera set. So cute. Here's a vintage recipe, part of a recipe page, cookbook page, and then I just put this image from a sewing pattern envelope for aprons on here, and this is a photocopy, so I got this from Pinterest, and you just have to be careful with sewing pattern envelope images. The illustrations are still copyrighted, so you really, if you're selling something, like I wouldn't put this in here because if I was selling it, because it's still under copyright, but I'm using it because this is just something I'm making for my personal use. I love these cute little canisters. I got those from Pinterest also. This is a box top, and I wanted it to feel kind of like a box top, so I scored just the top edge here, like about a 1/4 inch down from the top, and made it like a little flip lid, and there's just a vintage index card underneath of that you could write a recipe on or some journaling. Here's another one of those little milk caps that I just turned into a charm. So I just mounted it with foam tape on a couple different size punches there, and there's some jute string behind it also, just on a jump ring there. There's one of the little Pinterest images of an apron. This is one of my favorite printable box tops, and I just added some pom-pom trim and a tab, and I used my vintage labeler to add a little word there. And a vintage Betty Crocker recipe card from the recipe card library. Love those. Here's another cookbook cover that I love. And some of these elements I just added in here and just left them as is. So like this box top, I didn't do anything to embellish it. So it's just in here for just color, and you can always add to it later if you want to, or just have it in there as is. I didn't decorate everything. Here's another one of those cute little canisters. So this one I could add a recipe to, or some journaling. This could be in here just for color and pattern, or just to maybe add something to on top. I love this little gelatin dessert box. Just added a ticket and a word phrase on the top there. That one's really simple. This little Sailor Jack caramel popcorn box, I just added a couple layers of fabric, and then I glued some alphas on the side there. And here's an actual vintage recipe, and then you could always write on the back of that one because it's blank on the back. This little ice cream box top's got some fabric on the front, and then I added a vintage creamer cap on the front with a foam dot, just so it's got some dimension to it. Another one of my favorite cookbook covers. This is from one of the kitchen printable ephemera sets. Another vintage recipe card. So this here is a vintage green bean label, and I have a whole pack of these, and actually it is a big strip. So these were labels that were never actually used in manufacturing. They were just like extra overstock, and I bought a whole pack of them. So they're like this, 10 inches long or something, and I just folded it in half and glued it at the top here, and then left the sides open, and I just slipped a recipe card in the little space there. There's another canister. This is an ad I found on Pinterest. A little doily. And I leave my doilies like a couple layers thick. I don't like separate them so they can handle being hole punched. This here is a piece of scrapbook paper that I cut to the size of a little bit bigger than a recipe card, and I just added a little tab to the top with this label, word label on it. And this is a printable, or an image from the Retro Kitchen printable ephemera set that I cut out, and I just attached it at the bottom and the sides, so it's like a little tuck spot. And then I tucked in a vintage recipe card, and you could tuck anything in there. You could add some little die cuts to decorate it, or a doily, or just different little things, and it's a little tuck spot. And this is just like you would do in a journal. Just add some kind of little thing in the corner that you don't tack down completely and just leave open, and it just makes a great little tuck spot for things. And there's another little canister from that set, vintage recipe card. This is a page from one of those merchant stamp books, so people would save the little stamps and then turn them in when they've collected enough for different merchandise. So I added some washi tape to the top of that just because the paper was kind of thin. So you can do that on these too, just because you're punching holes. If the paper is thin, you can add reinforcer, little reinforcers, or some washi tape at the top. That'll help strengthen it. This little pie crust mix box, so cute. So this one I just closed in the top side and bottom with regular double-sided tape, and I just did a little notch out here on the top, and it's just mounted to scrapbook paper, and it just has a pocket here, so I left the side open for a pocket. This is just a little image I found on Pinterest for a Pyrex ad, and then I added some little ribbons to it. Another vintage recipe card. There's all kinds of fun little vintage recipe cards out there. Again, you can find them on eBay, Etsy. You can find them in antique shops, thrift stores. So just keep your eye out for those. They're great for journaling on. More scrapbook paper. This is a cover of my favorite cookbook binder that I shared with you a little while ago. I just found this image on Pinterest and just made it the size I wanted and cut that out, and then I can journal on the back of that. This is another little vintage recipe card that actually extends to a longer size, and these I had to cut down, so anything that folds like that just had to cut so it's not exactly even with the top, so you can have it fold and not get in the way of the binder ring. This here is a label that I attached to a piece of scrapbook paper. So you can see that. So I just took the scrapbook paper here and cut it a little bit taller than the label and a little narrower than the label. And then I wrapped the sides of the label around and attached it on the back. And then it's a little pocket. And then I just put this cute little journaling card inside the pocket. There's another index file card. And this box top I mounted also on scrapbook paper, but I left the bottom of the scrapbook paper like peeking out below the die cut just for a little extra color there. And then I just mounted a ticket with a couple little images on there, a little word phrase, a little Pyrex dish I also got from Pinterest. And this one I left the other side open, the left side open, and it's just a little pocket to put some fun little things inside. And a little printable flash card, another vintage recipe card with a milk cap on it, just waiting to be written on. So this is a different kind of milk cap. This is a bigger, it's like a 2.5 inch, maybe 2.25 inch wide milk cap, and it's thicker, if you can see that. And I just poked a hole in the top of it and added a jump ring, 2 jump rings, so it would lay properly in here. So I turned it into a little charm, and I have a whole little jar of these big milk caps that are really thick. I got these in a lot on eBay one time, and they just sit in this little vintage cracker jar that I have. So they make a fun little charm. And then I have a whole cookbook page here. This is from a small cookbook, and just kind of have that on there just for fun. And then last is a little shaker that I made from a box top where I cut the inside of the image out and then I covered it with tulle So it's like glitter mesh tool that I use to make a window. And then I just filled it with sequins, and it's mounted to scrapbook paper, and I just have foam tape. So there's some space there for the sequins. And that is this little deconstructed junk journal. And then I just took a bunch of different fabrics and tied it to the top. And this looks so cute hanging. I actually tried hanging this on a hook, and it really looks so cute hanging on a hook. So I think I'm going to actually put this inside one of my cabinets, as long as I have space. I may put it like on the back of the cabinet. If you put it on the door, there probably wouldn't be space. You know, it'll hit the shelf inside, but I may put this in either my pantry where there's some space, or on the back of the wall of my cabinet. So anyway, so they hang really neat. So I told you that I would share the elements that went into that. So I have my little, let me zoom out here. So this is everything that I've pulled together to make another one of these rings. So I've got my 1 3/4 inch ring here. It doesn't want to open, but all I need to do is hole punch all of these items and start adding them to the ring. But I like to decorate my pieces first, so I just kind of decide which things I'm going to decorate and do that first, and then I add them to the ring. So what I used was some vintage blank recipe cards like these, and some actual vintage recipe cards that have already been written on. And then I've got some printables. So these are some ones that I thought would be good for the theme I'm doing. So this is going to be one that's all just like dessert kind of baking recipes. So I've got some printables to add, vintage recipe card from the Betty Crocker Library. Got some of these blank index, what are these called? I think I'm calling it the wrong thing. It's like the little, I think they're called index tabs that you add to a recipe file box. Yeah, so I've got a couple of those, and of course I can journal on those too. And then I've just got some scrapbook paper that will kind of coordinate with this theme. So I'm thinking it's going to be like pinks and aquas and just a very mid-century pastel colors, which I thought went well with the baking theme. And then I've got a couple of my images from Pinterest. So all of these little aprons that I used in that last ring, I'm also going to use in this one. And then I've got some printable milk caps, or not printable, die cut milk caps. Oh, it's been a long day already, y'all. It's only like 2 o'clock and it's been a very long day. Some die cuts from Pretty Little Studio, and then I have some vintage milk caps also. Got one of my little vintage magnets that I will turn into a charm. Didn't have any baking ones. They were just vegetables. So we're just going to go with that, like carrot cake or something, you know. And along the lines of a charm, I've got these two. Oh, my thing is out of focus. Sorry about that. That might have been blurry the first few minutes. These vintage Tupperware measuring spoons. They came in a set. So I put 2 on the first flip that I showed you, and then I saved the pink and white ones for this baking set that I'm going to do. And then here is the little set of canisters. I think they are so cute. I just printed them on my favorite paper, my Staples Ultra Premium Matte Photo paper. It's a nice, stiff, pretty stiff, sturdy cardstock, and it just makes colors show up so well. And then these couple little Pyrex dishes that I printed off of Pinterest. So that's all you really need. So you've got, you know, some little images and some vintage ephemera, some scrapbook paper, some things that you can journal on, and some digital printables for their adorable little retro designs that you can use to decorate, embellish. You can journal on the backs of them. This is like one of those little boxes that has an image with a window, and you can just use a sharp craft knife and cut that out and turn that into a little shaker. And then, of course, some of the other vintage things that go with this theme, the vintage recipe cards. So hopefully that gives you an idea and of just, you know, how you can maybe make one of these little recipe card rings, or just any kind of little deconstructed junk journal in any theme that you like. So let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys really soon.